1975 was the year horror stopped playing by the old rules and started writing its own. The Gothic era was officially dead. The exploitation boom was in full swing, and filmmakers across the globe were pushing boundaries in every direction. Some toward art, some toward madness, most toward both at once. This was horror in transition. Grimy American drive-in fare rubbing shoulders with European surrealism, occult paranoia bleeding into mainstream thrillers, and auteurs using genre as a canvas for their most unhinged visions. The studio system had loosened its grip, censorship was crumbling, and suddenly anything felt possible. These weren't films designed for wide release or critical acclaim. They were made for midnight screenings, regional theaters, and the kinds of audiences willing to follow a story wherever it led, no matter how strange the destination. So tonight, we're traveling back to 1975, a year of occult obsessions, psychological unraveling, and cinematic fearlessness, to uncover 10 overlooked horror films that time forgot but shouldn't have. Lips of Blood, 1975. A man at a promotional event glimpses a photograph of a mysterious castle and becomes obsessed with recovering a buried childhood memory connected to the ruins. His search leads him to a beautiful young woman he believes he met years ago, a quest that awakens a coven of female vampires and forces him to confront a past his family tried desperately to erase. Directed by Rollin, Lips of Blood is pure dream state vampire cinema, a film that moves with the logic of memory and desire rather than traditional narrative structure. Rollin, a French auteur known for his poetic approach to horror, crafts a love story wrapped in Gothic atmosphere and erotic melancholy. This is vampire cinema at its most romantic and mournful, where death and love are indistinguishable. Jean-Louis Philippe plays Frédéric with genuine vulnerability, portraying obsession not as madness, but as an almost spiritual calling. Annabelle is ethereal as the vampire Jennifer, appearing and disappearing like a half-remembered dream given form. The supporting cast of female vampires moves through nighttime Paris like ghosts, their presence more sad than threatening. Rollin shoots Paris at night with remarkable beauty. Empty streets, ancient cemeteries, and crumbling ruins bathed in blue moonlight. The film has an improvised, almost accidental quality that somehow enhances its atmosphere. The budget was minimal, the locations were often borrowed or stolen, but these limitations force creativity that gives the film its unique texture. There's barely any violence, little traditional horror, just longing, memory, and the ache of trying to return to something lost. Lips of Blood won't satisfy anyone looking for conventional scares, but for those willing to surrender to its melancholic rhythm, it's hypnotic. Autopsy, 1975. A young pathologist in Rome begins experiencing disturbing hallucinations as she examines the bodies of apparent suicide victims during a citywide heatwave that seems to be driving the population toward madness. As the line between her professional life and psychological breakdown blurs, she uncovers a conspiracy that suggests these deaths might not be self-inflicted after all. Directed by Armando Crispino, Autopsy, also known as The Victim, is Italian Giallo, filtered through forensic horror and existential dread. The film trades the genre's typical masked killer theatrics for something more unsettling. A deep dive into death itself, both literal and psychological. Crispino fills the screen with clinical autopsy footage, paranoid dream sequences, and a Rome that feels like it's slowly cooking under the oppressive heat. Mimsy Farmer delivers a compelling performance as the increasingly unraveled protagonist, playing fragility and determination with equal conviction. Her character exists in a constant state of uncertainty, questioning her sanity, her memories, and the motives of everyone around her. Barry Primus and Ray Lovelock round out a cast that operates in morally gray territory where trust is a luxury no one can afford. The film's visual approach is striking. Crispino juxtaposes sterile morgue environments with hallucinatory sequences that feel like fever dreams. Ennio Morricone's score oscillates between discordant tension and melancholic beauty, adding layers of unease to scenes that already feel off-kilter. The autopsy sequences themselves are genuinely disturbing, shot with documentary-like detachment that makes them all the more uncomfortable. Autopsy never quite became a Giallo classic like its contemporaries, but it offers something rarer, a meditation on death, guilt, and societal collapse wrapped in genre clothing. The Amusement Park, 1975. An elderly man navigates a nightmarish amusement park where every attraction becomes a metaphor for the indignities, violence, and institutional cruelty inflicted upon the elderly in American society. What appears to be a simple day at the park transforms into a surreal journey through dehumanization, neglect, and systematic abuse. Directed by George A. Romero and commissioned by the Lutheran Service Society as an educational film about ageism, The Amusement Park is one of the most disturbing films ever made, and it was deemed too intense to be shown upon completion, remaining unreleased for decades. Romero takes the framework of a PSA and transforms it into psychological horror that's more unsettling than any zombie film he ever made. Lincoln Mazel, a non-professional actor, plays the elderly protagonist with heartbreaking vulnerability. He moves through the park's attractions, each one revealing another form of elder abuse, from financial exploitation to medical neglect to outright physical violence, with increasing confusion and despair. The performance is raw and genuine, making every humiliation land with uncomfortable force. Romero shoots the amusement park as a fever dream, using disorienting angles, harsh lighting, and overlapping sound design to create sensory overload. The attractions become increasingly nightmarish. A bumper car sequence turns into vehicular assault. A fortune teller delivers crushing mortality statistics. A motorcycle gang physically attacks the elderly for sport. Nothing is subtle. Everything is deliberately excessive. But the exaggeration reveals uncomfortable truths. The film's relentless bleakness and uncompromising vision made it unsaleable as educational material. But as horror cinema, it's devastatingly effective. The amusement park proves that real horror doesn't need supernatural elements, just an honest look at how society treats its most vulnerable. Footprints on the Moon, 1975. A translator wakes up with no memory of the past 3 days, plagued by fragments of a disturbing science fiction film she can't remember watching. Following cryptic clues and half-remembered images, she travels to a desolate coastal town where the residents seem to know her. But she has no recollection of ever being there before. Directed by Luigi Bazzoni and co-written by Mario Finelli, Footprints on the Moon, original title Le Orme, is one of Italian cinema's most haunting psychological mysteries, a film that operates more like a waking nightmare, where nothing is quite reliable and every answer leads to more unsettling questions. Florinda Bolkan gives a mesmerizing performance as Alice, embodying confusion and dread with quiet intensity. She moves through the film like someone trying to wake from a dream they're not sure is theirs, constantly off balance in environments that should be familiar but feel fundamentally wrong. Klaus Kinski appears in brief but unforgettable sequences from the fictional film within a film, playing an astronaut abandoned on the moon, imagery that mirrors Alice's own isolation and abandonment. Cinematographer Vittorio Storaro bathes everything in amber light and deep shadows, creating a sun-bleached Mediterranean setting. The film refuses easy explanations, embracing ambiguity and dream logic in ways that frustrated some audiences but captivated others. It's horror as existential mystery, less interested in monsters than in the terror of losing yourself completely. The Premonition, 1976. A young girl is abducted by her mentally unstable birth mother and a psychic clown, triggering a desperate search by her adoptive parents. As the investigation unfolds, the adoptive mother begins experiencing terrifying psychic visions that may be the only way to find her daughter before it's too late, but the visions themselves threaten her sanity. Directed by Robert Alan Schnitzer, The Premonition is regional horror cinema at its most ambitious, a film that tackles psychic terror, parental anxiety, and carnival grotesquerie with genuine emotional investment, despite obvious budget constraints. Shot in Mississippi with largely local talent, the film has a raw, unpolished quality that actually enhances its unsettling atmosphere. Sharon Farrell plays the adoptive mother with escalating desperation, selling the psychic visions with committed intensity. The sequences where she experiences flashes of her daughter's location are genuinely disorienting, using optical effects and sound design to create a sense of consciousness fragmenting under stress. Richard Lynch, always reliable as an unsettling presence, appears in a supporting role that adds menace to the proceedings. The film's most distinctive element is its villain, a mime-slash-clown character whose silence and white-face paint make him genuinely eerie rather than campy. The carnival setting provides appropriately liminal spaces for horror. Empty fairgrounds, abandoned rides, and spaces designed for joy turned threatening. Schnitzer wrings atmosphere from these locations, understanding that familiar spaces made wrong are inherently frightening. The Premonition never quite reaches the heights it's reaching for, but there's real ambition and heart in the attempt. It's the kind of regional independent horror that proves passion can compensate for limited resources, delivering genuine chills despite its rough edges. Satanico Pandemonium, 1975. A young nun begins experiencing intense visions of violence and temptation after a mysterious encounter in the convent garden. As demonic forces invade her every thought, she descends into sin, blasphemy, and acts of violence, unable to distinguish between hallucination and reality, as Satan himself seems determined to claim her soul. Directed by Gilberto Martinez Solares, Satanico Pandemonium is Mexican Nunsploitation at its most unhinged, a film that blends Catholic guilt, psychological horror, and surreal imagery into something that feels genuinely transgressive, even by exploitation standards. The film doesn't shy away from its provocative premise, delivering a parade of blasphemous imagery and forbidden desires while maintaining an oddly serious tone. Cecilia Pazé plays Sister Maria with remarkable commitment, navigating the character's psychological unraveling with genuine intensity. Her performance grounds the film's more outrageous moments, making the descent feel tragic, rather than purely exploitative. Enrique Rocha appears as the demonic tempter, equal parts seductive and sadistic, pushing Maria toward increasingly horrific acts. The film's visual approach leans heavily into religious iconography turned profane. Crucifixes, sacred spaces, and devotional rituals transformed into sites of corruption. The hallucination sequences are lurid and dreamlike, shot with garish colors and distorted compositions that emphasize Maria's fractured mental state. The Mexican locations provide appropriately Gothic backdrops, ancient convents and desolate landscapes that feel removed from time. Satanico Pandemonium walks a difficult line between exploitation and examination of religious repression, never quite settling on one or the other. It's simultaneously exploitative and genuinely interested in the psychological damage of extreme devotion and denied desire. The result is uncomfortable, excessive, and undeniably memorable. Race with the Devil, 1975. Two couples on a recreational RV trip through rural Texas witness a satanic sacrifice in a remote field. When they report what they saw, the local authorities dismiss their claims. But the cultists have no intention of letting witnesses escape. What begins as a vacation quickly becomes a high-speed chase through the Southwest, with devil worshippers closing in from every direction. Directed by Jack Starrett, Race with the Devil is one of the most effective occult thrillers of the 70s, a film that weaponizes American paranoia about rural outsiders and combines it with action movie pacing. The genius of the premise is its simplicity. Nowhere is safe, anyone could be involved, and the hero's best asset is their mobility, which becomes increasingly meaningless. As the conspiracy expands, Peter Fonda and Warren Oates anchor the film, with easy camaraderie and mounting desperation. They're not action heroes or investigators, just regular guys who made the mistake of seeing something they shouldn't have. Loretta Swit and Lara Parker complete the quartet, playing capable partners rather than screaming victims. The group dynamic feels authentic, their banter grounding the escalating supernatural threats. The cultists are genuinely menacing, Not theatrical Satanists, but everyday people who could be gas station attendants, mechanics, or local sheriffs. The film's paranoia comes from this ordinariness, the creeping realization that the conspiracy might be everywhere. The climax delivers one of horror's more nihilistic endings, refusing to provide easy resolution or safety. Race with the Devil taps into deep American anxieties about the unknown spaces between cities and what might be happening there, and it does so with relentless efficiency. Psychic Killer, 1975. A man wrongfully imprisoned for his mother's murder is released when new evidence proves his innocence, but his time behind bars has awakened latent psychic abilities. Using astral projection and telekinetic powers, he begins systematically murdering those responsible for his false conviction, leaving authorities baffled by deaths that seem to occur with no physical perpetrator present. Directed by Ray Danton, Psychic Killer is a supernatural revenge thriller that plays like a dark mirror to Death Wish, replacing Charles Bronson's vigilante justice with paranormal vengeance. The film takes its pulpy premise seriously enough to generate genuine tension, while embracing the B-movie absurdity of death by psychic powers. Jim Hutton plays the wronged protagonist, with quiet intensity that makes his turn toward vengeance feel earned rather than exploitative. He's not a cackling villain, but a broken man using newly discovered abilities to balance scales that were never fair to begin with. Paul Burke and Julie Adams play investigators trying to solve murders that defy physical explanation, bringing credibility to increasingly bizarre crime scenes. The kill sequences are inventive and often darkly humorous. Victims die in ways that appear accidental or impossible, leaving authorities with no suspects and no logical explanations. Danton stages these deaths with playful creativity, understanding that part of the film's appeal is watching karma delivered through supernatural means. The special effects are modest, but effective, selling the psychic projection concept without overreaching the budget. Beneath the exploitation surface, the film actually grapples with questions of justice and revenge, whether supernatural abilities justify vigilante action, and at what point justified anger becomes something darker. Psychic Killer doesn't dig too deep, but it acknowledges these themes exist, giving the pulp premise surprising substance. Night of the Seagulls, 1975. A young doctor and his wife arrive in a remote coastal village to take over the local medical practice, only to discover the community harbors a dark secret. Every 7 years, the villagers sacrifice young women to ancient creatures that emerge at night, drawn by tolling bells and centuries-old rituals that no one dares break. Directed by Armando de Osorio, Night of the Seagulls is the fourth and final entry in the Blind Dead series. What it lacks in the iconic imagery of the earlier films, it compensates with a pervasive sense of dread and a community horror setup that predates the Wicker Man's influence on the genre. Victor Petit and Maria Costi play the outsider couple with appropriate bewilderment and mounting horror as they realize the village's true nature. The locals, bound by fear and tradition, are portrayed not as villains, but as victims of a curse they're too terrified to challenge. This moral complexity gives the film unexpected weight. These aren't evil cultists, just desperate people making terrible choices. De Osorio builds tension through atmosphere rather than action. Fog-shrouded beaches, crashing waves, and the ominous sound of bells cutting through the night. The creatures themselves are effectively grotesque creations that feel genuinely ancient and malevolent. The ritualistic sacrifice scenes are staged with Gothic formality, emphasizing ceremony over exploitation. The film serves as a somber conclusion to the Blind Dead saga, ending the series on a quieter, more fatalistic note. It's less about spectacle and more about inevitability, the weight of history and how some evils become so entrenched that breaking them seems impossible. The Ghoul, 1975. This 1975 chiller from Tyburn Film Productions leans heavily into classic Gothic imagery. Decaying mansions, repressed secrets, and a dark presence that never quite shows itself until it's too late. Directed by Freddie Francis, known for his work with Hammer and Amicus, The Ghoul reunites Peter Cushing with that familiar world of creaking staircases and candlelit dread. At its core, it's a story of curiosity gone fatally wrong. A group of friends, lost after a car race through the English countryside, stumble upon an isolated estate belonging to a former clergyman haunted by his past. What waits inside is a disturbing secret hidden behind locked doors and within the decaying heart of the house, a secret that connects directly to his guilt and grief. Cushing, as always, gives the material emotional weight, playing a man torn between faith and madness. The movie feels like a time capsule of the fading Gothic horror era, arriving just as British studios were losing ground to the more visceral shocks of American cinema, but its gloomy tone, ornate visuals, and tragic performances make it an intriguing farewell to that classic style. The Ghoul stands as both a love letter and a eulogy, the echo of Hammer's haunted corridors still lingering one last time before the lights went out. 1975 captured horror at its most adventurous and uncompromising. A year when the genre stretched in every possible direction, refusing to be contained by convention or good taste. These films prove that horror's greatest strength has always been its flexibility. What unites these titles isn't budget or country of origin, but fearlessness. They're willing to be weird, disturbing, slow, excessive, or all of the above simultaneously. They were made for audiences willing to meet them halfway, to accept unconventional structures and uneasy atmospheres in exchange for experiences that couldn't be found anywhere else. These weren't films designed to spawn franchises or launch careers. They were singular visions captured on whatever resources were available, then sent into the world to find their people. Some did, many didn't, but all of them earned their place in horror's hidden history. If you're drawn to the strange corners of genre cinema, the overlooked experiments, the regional oddities, the films that took risks and paid whatever price came with them, hit that subscribe button and let us know what other years or themes deserve this kind of deep dive. Thanks for watching. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.